Good afternoon, everyone. Today is July 21st, 2021, and we are discussing today the ABCs of insurance. Thank you, everyone, for coming out during this lunch hour, and I'm very excited to share this opportunity with the Healys to discuss, the ABCs of insurance. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick, and we will get started. So for today, we obviously have this lunch and learn opportunity to discuss the ABCs of insurance. And for this presentation, we decided to break down ABC to be auto, bundled, and coverages. So throughout insurance, as many of us know, there's a lot of different components for the insurance world. For the policies themselves, we have, different words that are associated with, the policy, with the coverages, with, certain things that potentially could happen. So I thought that this word cloud was definitely important to start the presentation and just look over real quick to see, all the different components of, what insurance really is. So I just want to take a pause and let us reflect for a quick moment. And if anyone has any questions, we're always happy to help. So you can just interrupt us and we'll be able to jump on in. All right. So one of the first things that we wanted to talk about today was automobile coverage. Automobile coverage is very important. As the Healys always say, cheap is expensive. The state minimum coverages for the state of New Jersey of $1,535 doesn't really help you when it comes to a large claim. You don't want to think about, those scenarios that may or may not happen, but, reviewing your coverages is something that we want to emphasize today, which is crucially important. Certain things you want to review for the policy is that you have the ability to potentially have accident waivers, which is really important. So let's just say something were to happen and you have that accident waiver. One, you won't be surcharged for that accident, and two, your rates won't go up because of that accident. Fortunately, I've recently had to experience this myself after I decided to wreck my car at the golf outing, but thankfully I had that accident waiver, so I am in good hands. Something about the automobile coverages that you can potentially look over is, potentially raising your deductible, lowering your personal injury protection coverage, or different coverage changes that aren't, too drastic for you to potentially save some money across the board, which will help you with your policy. Something that I wanted to emphasize mostly about the automobile insurance is that for Allstate's market particularly, they have a policy called MileWise, which has the ability to have a policy that charges you per mile as well as per day. So for insureds who, are still unfortunately stuck at home, for insureds who don't, drive regularly, for senior citizens who only go to ShopRite and then back home, or, young kids who live in Hoboken and, travel to the city, so on and so forth, it's a good opportunity for you to save some money. And then we wanted to jump into auto rental coverage. So I'll pass that off to the Healys to kind of describe.
Thank you, Kathrine. Done a nice job so far. You're making us feel comfortable. We are insured by New Jersey manufacturers for our auto. And 2 years ago, when we were going to travel to California, I checked with them and I said, will my auto policy cover me to rent a car in California? We're only going to rent the car for 8 days, 7 nights, whatever it is. And they said yes. So we did not purchase auto liability coverage, but always purchase collision damage waiver. It's something like $35 or $50 a day. That means that if somehow you get a fender bender, that will cover you with the rental company. And when you turn the car in with the fender bender, they will send you on your way to have a good flight. We had that experience 22 years ago out in Oregon. We rented the car and I told Michael, let's get the collision damage waiver. During our stay there, it cost us like $75 for 3 days, $25 a day. Somebody hit the side mirror of the car. When we brought the car back, before we took our flight, the guy, we told him what happened. He checked what we had taken as insurance. He said, you're covered for that. Have a nice flight. It's wonderful, a wonderful thing. Even someone who's a business owner, if you're doing it for work and you're traveling, take the collision damage waiver. Your employer will love you for it.
Beautiful. And then something I just wanted to close on that is that certain companies, like rental car companies, waive fees for you, dependent on what insurance company you have for the automobile insurance. So that's something to always ask, is based on my current insurance company, do you waive particular fees for me because I have that policy? All right, moving on. We wanted to emphasize the importance of bundling. So obviously with bundling, you have the ability to bundle your home, your auto, potentially if you have a landlord, flood insurance, so on and so forth. So if you have the ability, or you've never really checked out the opportunity to bundle the insurance, it's something you can always look into. A lot of the time when you bundle, especially the home and the auto, it potentially can provide savings up to like 25% across the board for the two policies. And who doesn't like saving some money? Something that I've noticed recently with a lot of customers, for those who rent or for those who still live at home, having a renter's insurance policy for themselves usually ultimately pays for itself. So having your automobile policy bundled with a renter's policy, even though you potentially are not necessarily renting your home, you're just living at home, provides great savings to your policy, as well as covering your own personal belongings. So again, for a renter's policy, the main contributing portion of that is the personal property, which it covers your personal belongings, God forbid something were to happen. So, if you were renting out, a home for the summertime and you wanted to protect your personal belongings, that's something that you can look into, especially with bundling with your auto policy to help you provide some savings to that policy. I think collectively, all of us as insurance agents want to emphasize that if you have all the policies in one office, then you are a one-stop shop. With myself as well as the Healys, the office is a small office, and you have the ability to talk to a real person, and that's something I wanted to emphasize greatly. Whenever you need to speak to one of us, you just ask for one of us, and you are able to get us on the phone relatively quickly, or a message will be taken and then we'll follow up with you as soon as we can. You're not talking to an 800 number. You're not talking to Joe and then you're talking to Michael and then you're transferred to somebody else. You will get one of us pretty much every single time, or one of our colleagues who so happens to answer the phone, which is, they're all fully capable just as much as all of us are. And then we wanted to talk about the flood insurance. So back to the Healys.
Thank you, Catherine. Flood is a nasty thing. This is the time when water is not your friend. What flood insurance covers is the overflow of a body of water onto your property. Flood insurance does not cover a broken water heater that made a mess in the basement, an overflowing toilet, and we've all had that experience. It doesn't cover that. It is designed to cover property, not just it's really not the land, it's the buildings on the land. So if your property has your house, and say you have a cottage in the back, any damage to the house and the cottage is covered by the one policy. Flood insurance is afforded by the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP. Most of us fall into their coverage that they make available. Whether you are in a preferred flood zone or a special hazard flood zone. Healy Brokerage is located in Middletown, and we are in a preferred flood zone. We're only 2 miles from the Keensburg Boardwalk and the Keensburg and Ideal Beach. but we're in a preferred flood zone. What does that mean? It can cost as little as $500 to $600 for the year. But we don't like to tell you it's going to cost that. We go into the program and we quote that. We are working on a new piece of business where the house is between two bodies of water. Why anybody would want to do that, I don't know, but they're going to buy this house. And so far, no other company, no national flood insurance program, and that program goes back to almost 40 years ago. It's been around a while. It is also get support from FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Association. FEMA and National Flood go back to the early 70s. FEMA in 1968. It was begun by then President Richard M. Nixon. He should have stuck to that and stopped being a politician. He was good at that stuff. Here's the point. When we have to go beyond that, that's where flood insurance gets expensive. This man, right now, it's going to cost him $11,000 to cover the property for flood. And we, as brokers, we let the mortgage companies dictate that to us. And we go back to our clients and we'll say, your mortgage company requires that you carry that. The limit through the National Flood Insurance Program for a home, a residence, is $250,000 for the building and $100,000 for the contents. For a commercial building, it's $500,000 for the building and $250,000 for the contents. If whether you're sure or you're not sure, just ask us. And we find out as we take on new business where you fall in the flood zone. Doesn't mean you have to have flood insurance. And while New Jersey is the garden state, it's also the flood state. Every area of New Jersey is in a flood zone. We prefer to see the preferred, but if you're not, you got to think about it. So, just be sure we're in that season where the weather makes those bodies of water overflow. It belongs in the pool, not in your living room. That's the best way to describe it.
That was a good joke. All right, so we are gonna conclude with the coverage portion of it. So with coverages collectively for insurance, there's mostly a policy for everything, which would include jewelry, paintings, one-day events, so on and so forth. For the coverages, again, for the emphasis is that you should read your insurance policy. I know sometimes the documents are very overwhelming and the insurance company sends you like 80 pages for you to review. However, you rather read them now instead of read them later and realize that you don't have particular coverages. Certain coverages that I wanted to emphasize today is, your deductibles. First of all, a 1% deductible for your house policy may not seem too bad because it's only, quote unquote 1%, but it's 1% of the replacement cost of the home. So ultimately, a $16,000 deductible is not something that I feel most people are comfortable with to pay for, God forbid, there was a claim. That's something that I've seen way too often this week. Something else that, insureds don't realize is they don't have rental reimbursement coverage. So ultimately, if you get into an accident and you don't have an additional car, it may be best to put on rental reimbursement coverage. Lately, $30 a day is not cutting it. Trust me. I learned that mistake myself last week. It should really be more so $40 a day in order for you to have proper coverage, for you not to have to pay out of pocket for an additional expense when you shouldn't have to, and the policy kind of pays for it ultimately. Some additional coverages that are potentially available to you when it comes to the house insurance is service line coverage. So that usually protects, the water lines underneath the house, whether they break, tear, rip, there's a hole, so on and so forth. My Nana actually had this issue this year. So there was a hole in the water line, which was making the toilet bowl flush constantly for hours on hours. She realized this when, the water bill was $800 for one lady. And she, ultimately found out that there was holes in the water line. She paid her deductible, and then the insurance company paid the rest. If she didn't have that particular coverage, she would have been, out, $7,000 for a crazy situation. Another coverage that I like to emphasize is mold protection coverage. So most of the time, there's not coverage for mold on a house policy. It has to be something that's added, and the mold coverage protects the property damage as well as the liability coverage for the mold situation. So ultimately, let's just say I went over to somebody's house and there was mold and I got sick because of that mold and I were to sue them. Again, there's property damage coverage for the mold, and then the liability coverage for me suing, my friend because I got sick because of their mold, which is not really the nicest thing to do, but New Jersey is very sue happy. Which, the last point, which I'll flip back to the Healys, is the importance of, potentially obtaining umbrella coverage.
Thank you again, Kathrine. In the picture there, you see the umbrella? What that means, just think of it, it picks up over your personal liability, which is, as Kathrine described, the slips and falls, or somehow somebody gets hurt on your premises. And there's also another hidden coverage within the homeowner's policy called workers' comp. What it's designed to cover is the electrician that comes in, the plumber, the computer guy, somebody that does that. If you have live-in help, you need a separate policy for them. And you also need to keep payroll records, and you also need to keep records of their citizenship, because the Workers' Comp Board will find you and ask you for this. And I know what it means to make a grown man cry. Somebody had that happen to them, and it cost them $1,000 a day. Give me the $1,000 a day and you'll be my new daddy. The person that handled that insurance for them did not make it clear. And for Kathrine and for us, we put stuff in writing so that if something does come about, we can say we've explained it and we put it in writing. That's so, so important. New Jersey is suit happy. Now that umbrella I just told you about would pick up if there's an injury. The guy came in and he slipped and fell and broke, God forbid, broke a shoulder, broke a leg, God forbid, in your house. That umbrella would pick up over that claim. We generally say a $1 million limit for an umbrella. It's worth it. And they are rated on every level of 1 million. The first million is so much. The limit above that is so much per million. Many companies have the capacity to offer you up to 5 million. Many do, many don't. So whoever's working on that for you would tell you that. Auto insurance, we're having an argument with a current client. He drives luxury cars. His wife leases a luxury car, and he has 2 young men in the family that are 25 years of age and less. Okay? He should be carrying at least 500,000. I'm having a hard time getting him to purchase the extra 200,000 it's going to cost. Well, next time one of the boys who just totaled one of their vehicles totals another vehicle, oh well. So these kinds of things, that umbrella's there, but they expect you to be proactive with them and carry those levels of underlying coverage. So that's important. Even on the commercial side, we tell people that. We also advise people on their personal liability. Everybody's got a busy household. Carry at least 500,000 for that, or even $1 million. There are times our house is Grand Central Station and it's always the two of us. It's only the two of us. So be proactive, be there. You have questions. We'd love to, help advise and see that, things go well for you, especially after this nasty pandemic thing.
Your house is Grand Central Station when you're cooking and posting pictures on Facebook of how delicious your food is.
Hey, you never know. We just had work done outside, you know, we may, and we'll talk about it with you guys. The chamber, we're thinking of having like a christening to our new deck. It was
Oh,
30 years old. It had to be replaced, you know?
that's too
And
funny.
yeah, you'll get to see the kitchens of Casa Gilda.
Will do. All right. I think I'm gonna cut the recording, and then we can just ask questions. So let me just stop.